Hello, everyone, and welcome to Silent Kane. I'm Kane, your guide through stories of mystery, danger, and the hidden truths of the underworld. Let's begin today's case. Beneath the flickering neon lights of a city that never truly sleeps, crime festers like a silent plague. The underworld breathes in alleys drowned in cigarette smoke, in back rooms where money changes hands as easily as lives are traded, and in the hushed whispers of betrayals that are always only a heartbeat away. This is the city where Silas Kane moves, not as a savior, nor a man seeking glory, but as a detective caught between justice and the abyss. Silas Kane is a name whispered with both respect and fear. His past is a locked vault, and even those closest to him know little beyond fragments of scars, old wounds, and a haunted silence that often lingers in his eyes. What is known is simple. He has solved cases that no one else dared to touch, threading himself into the heart of the underworld and walking away where others never returned. His talent is not in brute force, though he is no stranger to violence. It is in his uncanny ability to read people, to see through lies, and to recognize the patterns of deceit that form the backbone of organized crime. Yet each step deeper into this world demands a price, and Silas knows he is paying with pieces of himself. The underworld is not a monolith. It is a labyrinth of gangs, mafia families, and syndicates that thrive on drugs, blood money, and silence. The law barely scratches their surface. Corruption reaches too far, and power shields too many. Silas dares to confront them not because he believes he can purge the darkness, but because he cannot turn away. Justice for him is personal. Perhaps it is vengeance. Perhaps it is guilt. No one knows, not even Silas himself, but the fire that burns within him is relentless. The Vortex of Guilt is not just a story of crimes and investigations. It is a descent into a world where truth is buried under lies, where loyalty is a fleeting currency, and where betrayal can come from the person standing at your side. Each case Silas takes pulls him further into a vortex, a storm of past regrets, unspoken secrets, and moral lines blurred beyond recognition. The vortex is not only the world around him, but also the guilt he carries, the mistakes he cannot undo, and the haunting memories that surface when the night is at its quietest. In these pages, you will follow Silas through a city veined with shadows. You will walk beside him in a mafia-owned casinos where smiles are as deadly as the guns hidden beneath tailored suits. You will chase him through rain-soaked alleys where every echo may be a death sentence. You will stand in the silence of interrogation rooms where truth is a weapon, and in the chaos of shootouts where survival is measured in seconds. And all the while, you will glimpse the past that refuses to let him go, a past that holds the key not only to his relentless pursuit of justice, but also to the storm threatening to consume him. This is not a tale for the faint-hearted. It is not a promise of happy endings. It is a story of grit, of betrayal, of truths clawing their way to the surface, no matter how deep they are buried. Above all, it is the story of a detective who walks willingly into the darkness because he knows that if he does not, no one else will. Welcome to the world of Silas Kane. Welcome to the Vortex of Guilt. The rain came down in a steady sheet, drumming against the tin roofs and cobblestone streets of the forgotten city. Neon lights flickered in fractured reflections on puddles that lined the sidewalks, turning every shadow into a living specter. The city had always carried its secrets beneath layers of smog and silence, but tonight it felt different, heavier, as though the darkness itself had grown teeth. Silas Kane stood under the awning of an abandoned bookstore, collar turned high against the rain. A cigarette smoldered between his fingers, its ember glowing faintly in the gloom. He didn't smoke because he liked it. He smoked because the silence of waiting gnawed at him. And tonight, waiting was all he had. The call had come 3 hours ago. A body found near the docks. No witnesses, no sound, No sign except a single bullet wound between the eyes. It was the kind of execution that carried a message, though no one would admit to sending it. Silas knew better. The underworld always spoke in silence, and if you listened closely, silence said more than words ever could. He ground the cigarette against the wet pavement and walked into the rain. His trench coat clung to his frame, soaked within minutes, but he didn't care. He had long stopped caring about comfort. What mattered was the truth, always hidden, always dangerous, always just beyond reach. The dock stretched like a skeleton into the restless waters. Police tape fluttered in the wind, and two uniformed officers lingered at the edge of the crime scene. They stiffened when Silas approached, though he wasn't wearing a badge. He hadn't for years. He didn't need one. His reputation preceded him like a shadow. Detective Kane, one of the officers muttered, stepping aside. "Didn't think you'd show up." "I'm not here for pleasantries," Silas replied, his voice gravel rough from too many nights without sleep. "What do we have?" The younger officer swallowed. "Male, mid-30s. No ID. Shot once clean. Whoever did this knew what they were doing." Silas crouched near the body. Rainwater pooled in the victim's open eyes, and a lifeless stare reflected the neon lights in fractured shards. He reached into his coat and pulled out a pair of gloves, slipping them on with practiced ease. Every detail mattered: the angle of the wound, the type of bullet, the placement of the body. "Single shot," Silas murmured, half to himself. "Professional. No signs of struggle." He trusted the killer, or never saw it coming. "Any chance it's just a robbery gone wrong?" the younger officer asked. Silas didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a small flashlight and traced the outlines of the victim's hands. Clean. No dirt. No bruising. This man hadn't fought back. His pockets were empty, but not ransacked. His shoes, polished, expensive, spoke of money. His watch was gone, but the faint tan line around his wrist told Silas it had been taken carefully, not ripped away. "Not a robbery," Silas said finally, standing to his full height. This was a message, and whoever he was, he mattered. The older officer shifted uncomfortably. "To who?" Silas looked toward the city skyline, where towers pierced the mist like jagged knives. "That's what I intend to find out." The night deepened as Silas left the docks. The rain hadn't stopped, and the city gleamed like a dying star beneath it. His mind worked in silence, piecing fragments into a pattern only he could see. A man in his 30s, wealthy, executed at the docks. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. And deliberate killings meant power was at play. He headed to the only place where whispers turned into leads, a bar called the Black Lantern. Hidden between shuttered warehouses, it was the kind of place where criminals drank without fear of law, where money changed hands in the shadows, and where everyone knew Silas Kane by name. Not because he was welcome, but because no one dared deny him entry. The door creaked open to a haze of smoke and a low hum of jazz spilling from an old gramophone. Eyes turned as he entered, sizing him up, then quickly looking away. Silas scanned the room until his gaze locked on the bartender, a grizzled man named Rourke, who had seen too much and said too little. "Silas," Rourke greeted, sliding a glass of whiskey across the counter. "Didn't think you'd be out in this weather." "The city doesn't stop for rain," Silas replied, taking the glass but not drinking. "I'm looking for information." Rourke smirked. "Aren't you always?" "A man was killed at the docks tonight. Professional hit. Expensive shoes, expensive life. Someone sending messages." The bar fell quieter, as though the walls themselves listened. Rourke leaned in, lowering his voice. "Word is the Cardenas Syndicate's been moving shipments through the docks again. Drugs, mostly. Maybe he crossed them. Or maybe he was working for them," Silas countered. Rourke's eyes flickered. "Maybe. But if you're digging into this, you're walking into deep waters. The Syndicate doesn't play games." Silas set the glass down and straightened his coat. "Neither do I." Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The city's heartbeat echoed in distant sirens and the muffled roar of traffic. Silas lit another cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating the lines etched into his face. Each wrinkle was a story, each scar a memory. He inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, and let his mind wander through the storm of possibilities. The Cardenas Syndicate. Powerful, ruthless. Their reach extended through politicians, businesses, even the police. If they were involved, this wasn't just about one dead man. It was about control, and control always came at a cost. Silas flicked the cigarette into the gutter and disappeared into the night, his silhouette swallowed by the shadows of the forgotten city. The drizzle turned the streets into a blur of dim reflections. Silas walked with steady steps, each footfall echoing against the wet pavement. He wasn't wandering aimlessly. His instincts, honed over years of tracing patterns others overlooked, guided him. If the Cardenas Syndicate had touched this case, then the trail would not begin in marble offices or penthouse suites. It would begin in the cracks of the city, the places where men disappeared, where drugs bled into lives, where fear lived permanently in people's eyes. He headed toward Old District 7, a part of the city that official maps no longer cared to label. Broken windows stared down from forgotten tenements. Graffiti marked every surface like scars, and the smell of rust and gasoline lingered in the damp air. For Silas, District 7 was familiar territory. It was where information hid, where witnesses who feared the police whispered only when the right man asked the right questions. The rain had driven most people indoors, but one figure still lingered beneath the skeletal frame of a collapsed fire escape. A boy no older than 15 watched Silas approach with cautious eyes. "Evening, Miles," Silas said, his voice low, steady. The boy shifted uneasily. "You shouldn't be here, Kane. Word's out. The syndicate's angry. They say someone's asking too many questions." "Then I'm asking the right ones," Silas replied, fishing a folded bill from his coat and slipping it into the boy's palm. "What do you know about the body at the docks?" Miles bit his lip. "Only whispers. He was someone important. Not syndicate, but connected. They say he was an accountant. Handled money that wasn't supposed to exist. Black accounts, offshore deals. He must have seen something he shouldn't." "Names?" Silas pressed. The boy shook his head. "No names. Just a meeting. 2 nights ago. Warehouse 17, near the East Pier. He was there. After that, he ends up dead." Silas tucked the information into his memory like a puzzle piece sliding into place. Warehouse 17, he knew the place. Abandoned on paper, but alive at night with smuggling operations. The syndicate's fingerprints were all over it. "Stay out of sight, Miles," Silas said softly. "And if anyone asks, you never saw me." The boy nodded quickly and vanished into the shadows, leaving Silas alone with the rain and the whispers of the district. Warehouse 17 loomed over the pier like a slumbering beast. Its windows were shattered, its doors rusted, but a faint hum of electricity and the flicker of distant lights betrayed its secret life. Silas didn't approach head-on. He circled, keeping to the darkness, until he found an unguarded side entrance where the padlock had already been snapped by someone else's impatience. Inside, the air smelled of salt, oil, and something sharper. Cocaine, freshly packed in crates labeled as coffee beans. Silas crouched behind a stack of boxes and let his eyes adjust. Men in heavy coats moved methodically, unloading shipments, counting stacks of cash. Armed guards lingered at every corner, their hands resting casually on pistols as though death was part of the scenery. And then Silas saw him, but a man in a tailored gray suit, untouched by the grime of the warehouse, stood near a desk covered in ledgers. He was mid-40s, sharp-featured, with the cold elegance of someone accustomed to power. Silas recognized him instantly. Victor Cardenas, the syndicate's financial architect, the man who kept their empire flowing with invisible ink. Victor was speaking, his voice calm but razor-edged. The accountant should have known better. Numbers can be erased, but memories their liabilities. "We made an example. Now, let that be the last time anyone forgets their place. The guards chuckled darkly. Silas' jaw tightened. So the dead man wasn't random. He had been silenced for what he knew, which meant there was more at stake than a single murder. Documents, accounts, secrets worth killing for. That he reached into his coat, pulled a small recorder from his pocket, and let it capture Victor's words. Evidence, fragile and dangerous, but a start. Then a floorboard creaked. Not his. Silas froze. One of the guards turned sharply, scanning the shadows. His gaze swept dangerously close to Silas' hiding place. For a moment, time stretched thin as a wire. The guard's hand hovered over his weapon. Silas' breath slowed, his mind calculating exits, movements, possibilities. He had survived too many nights like this to let panic win. Then, from across the warehouse, a crate slipped and crashed to the floor. Coffee beans spilled in a noisy cascade. The guard cursed, turning his attention to the noise. Silas exhaled silently, moving like a shadow toward the side door. He slipped out, unnoticed, but his mind was racing. Victor Cardenas had confirmed the syndicate's involvement. The accountant had been killed for secrets hidden in numbers. The next step was clear. Find those numbers before they disappeared into the abyss. By the time Silas returned to his apartment, dawn was bleeding pale light into the horizon. His place was small, cluttered with case files and maps pinned with red strings crisscrossing like veins of obsession. The smell of stale coffee lingered. He threw his coat onto a chair, lit another cigarette, and sat before the wall of evidence. He pinned a photograph of the dead man beside Victor Cardenas' name. Then he drew a line connecting them, an arrow pointing towards something larger, something buried. Silas leaned back, staring at the map as smoke curled around him. Every case had threads, and those threads always led deeper. The accountant was a thread. Victor was another. Together, they were pulling him toward the vortex he could never escape. The place where justice and survival clashed, and where guilt was the only constant companion. Outside, the city stirred awake, but for Silas Kane, the night was far from over. Sleep was not something Silas expected, nor something he sought. The city was too restless, and so was he. Instead, he poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat by the window, watching the streets below. The drizzle had stopped, leaving the asphalt slick and gleaming under the first strokes of daylight. He replayed Victor Cardenas' words in his head, each syllable sharpened into a blade. Numbers can be erased, but memories their liabilities. It wasn't just a declaration, it was a philosophy. The syndicate had mastered the art of erasing traces. If an accountant had become a liability, then somewhere in the shadows there existed records, proof that Victor couldn't afford to let survive. Proof Silas now had to find, but proof had a way of vanishing. And men like Victor had a way of making those who searched vanish with it. Silas lit a cigarette, the smoke curling against the pale morning light. His wall of evidence loomed before him, chaotic to most eyes, but to him it was order. Threads stretched between photographs, maps, police reports, and scribbled notes. In the center, a new focal point, the accountant. A nameless victim who had unwittingly pulled Silas deeper into the vortex. The sound of his phone broke the silence. It was the kind of ring that carried urgency, the kind that usually meant trouble. "Kane," he answered, voice gravelied on the other end. A woman's voice whispered, hurried and trembling. "You don't know me, but I don't have anyone else. My name is Elena Marquez. I worked with him, the man they killed." Silas' grip on the phone tightened. "The accountant?" "Yes. His name was Daniel Vega. We were close. I know why he died, and I think they're coming for me next." Silas' eyes narrowed. "Where are you?" "An old motel off Riverside. Room 12. Please, hurry." The line went dead. Silas stared at the receiver for a moment. A trap? Perhaps. But in his world, waiting often meant burying the truth before it could surface. And if Elena Marquez was telling the truth, She might be the only living link to what Daniel Vega knew. He grabbed his coat and gun, holstering the weapon beneath the folds of fabric. The city outside was awakening, but to him, it was just another battleground. The Riverside Motel was the kind of place where anonymity was sold by the hour, where curtains never opened, and where silence was bought as cheaply as cigarettes. Silas parked his car across the street and surveyed the scene. A couple of rusted vehicles sat idle in the lot. No obvious guards, no syndicate cars. Still, he approached cautiously. Instinct had saved him too many times to ignore. He climbed the stairs, the wood creaking under his boots, until he reached room 12. He knocked once. Silence. "Elena Marquez," he said, voice firm. "It's Kane. You called me." A pause. Then the lock clicked. The door opened a sliver, revealing a woman in her early 30s. Dark hair fell in disarray over her shoulders, her eyes wide with fear. She stepped aside, motioning him in quickly. The room smelled of cheap disinfectant and cigarette smoke. A single lamp cast a yellow glow over the bed, where a leather satchel sat half open, filled with papers and a small flash drive. Elena's hands trembled as she spoke. "Daniel told me everything before they took him. He said the syndicate was laundering millions, moving money through fake charities, offshore accounts. He kept records. He gave them to me, in case something happened." She gestured to the satchel. "It's all here." Silas approached, scanning the documents. Bank transfers, coded ledgers, false company registrations. It was a treasure trove of evidence. Enough to cripple Victor Cardenas if it reached the right hands. But before he could say a word, the sound of tires screeched outside. Elena's eyes widened. "They found me." Silas moved swiftly, gun in hand, and pulled the curtains back just enough to see. Two black sedans had pulled into the lot. Men stepped out, armed, moving with the precision of wolves closing on prey. "Elena, get down," Silas ordered. He grabbed the satchel and shoved it against her chest. "Stay low. Don't move unless I tell you." The first knock rattled the door. Not polite, demanding. "Open up, Miss Marquez," a voice growled from outside. "We just want to talk." Silas positioned himself against the wall, gun raised, his heartbeat steady. He had been here before. Different doors, different enemies, same dance with death. The second knock was followed by the sound of a lock being forced. The door burst inward. Two men stepped through, guns raised. They never saw Silas until it was too late. A flash. Two shots. Both dropped before they could fire. "Elena, move." Silas barked. He pulled her toward the bathroom as more footsteps thundered up the stairs. Bullets shattered the window, showering the room with glass. Silas crouched low, returning fire with calm precision. One gunman fell outside the door, but more kept coming. The motel became a battlefield, walls splintering, lamps toppling, the smell of gunpowder mixing with stale air. Through the chaos, Silas felt the weight of the satchel against his side. Inside lay the truth, the kind that people killed for, the kind that could tear the syndicate apart. But first, he had to survive the night. The firefight dragged on, relentless. Elena clung to the corner, wide-eyed, while Silas moved with calculated brutality, each shot purposeful, each movement efficient. He was a man shaped by violence, not because he loved it, but because it was the language his enemies spoke best at. Last silence. Only the echo of footsteps retreating, the growl of engines as the survivors fled into the dawn. Silas exhaled, sweat mixing with dust on his brow. He lowered his gun but did not relax. "They'll be back," he said. Elena nodded, clutching the satchel as if it were life itself. "What do we do?" Silas met her gaze, his eyes like steel. Now we run. And we don't stop until the truth sees daylight." Outside, the forgotten city glimmered under the rising sun. But for Silas Kane, shadows still ruled, and the storm had only just begun. The city woke under a pale sun, its skyline painted gold yet still veined with shadows. From a distance, it might have looked alive, even hopeful. But Silas Kane knew better. Behind the morning bustle, behind the illusion of normalcy, predators still hunted. The syndicate never slept, and neither could he. The satchel lay on the motel bed, its weight heavier than steel. Elena Marquez sat beside it, her hands wrapped tightly around a half-empty glass of water. Fear etched lines into her face that hadn't been there the night before. She had crossed a threshold now. Once you possessed secrets the syndicate wanted buried, you stopped being a civilian. You became prey. Silas lit a cigarette, pacing the room. His trench coat was torn from the firefight, his knuckles raw. He didn't care. His mind was on the satchel. "What exactly did Daniel tell you?" he asked without looking at Elena. She swallowed hard. That Victor Cardenas wasn't just moving money for the syndicate. He was rewriting their entire empire. Offshore accounts, dummy charities, blood money disguised as disaster relief. Billions, Silas. Not millions, billions. Silas exhaled smoke, slow and heavy. Enough to buy judges. Enough to buy senators. Enough to own the city itself. Elena nodded. Daniel said Victor was planning to consolidate everything. All the rival families, all the gangs, they'd become one under him. He called it the Unification Project. If he succeeds, the syndicate won't just own the Underworld. They'll own everything. Silas finally stopped pacing. His gaze locked on hers, steady, sharp. "And you think the documents in that satchel are proof?" "They're more than proof. They're a map. Every transaction, every false front, every politician on their payroll. It's all there. If the right people saw it, they'd bury it." Silas cut her off. "The right people are already on the payroll. You don't hand a loaded gun to the man pointing a knife at you." Elena's lips trembled. "Then what do we do?" Silas stubbed out the cigarette and pulled on his coat. "We find someone they can't buy. Someone who still believes justice matters." Elena gave a bitter laugh. "In this city? Does anyone like that exist?" Silas didn't answer. His silence was heavy enough. He had known men once. Idealists. Officers who wore their badges with honor. Judges who believed the law meant something. Most of them were dead now. The rest had been bought. But there was one name that flickered in the back of his mind. One thread of hope wrapped in danger. Detective Marcus Hale. They had once been partners years ago before Silas walked away from the force. Hale had been by the book, rigid, unbending. The kind of man who didn't flinch when offered bribes, who didn't bow when threatened. They had bled together in alleys and interrogation rooms, chasing the same devils that now ran free. But something had broken between them. A case gone wrong, a betrayal neither had forgotten. Hale was still on the force. Still clean, if rumors were true. But reaching out to him meant opening old wounds, and Silas had enough scars already. "Elena," Silas said finally, his voice flat. "Pack the satchel. We're moving. Too many ears know this place." The streets were alive when they left the motel. Vendors shouted in markets. Children darted between cars. The hum of the city disguising the danger that stalked them. Silas kept his eyes scanning the reflections in windows, the movement of cars behind them. He trusted no one, not even the daylight. They reached Silas' car, an old black sedan that blended into the city's noise. As Elena climbed in, Silas paused. Across the street, leaning casually against a lamppost, was a man in a leather jacket, pretending to light a cigarette. His eyes, however, were not on the flame. They were on Silas, a spotter. Silas didn't hesitate. He slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and pulled into traffic. The rearview mirror confirmed it. A black SUV slipped in behind them, its tinted windows betraying nothing but intent. "They found us," Elena whispered, clutching the satchel. "Of course they did," Silas muttered. "Victor's reach is everywhere. Hold on." The engine growled as Silas wove through traffic, cutting sharp corners, forcing taxis and buses to screech in protest. The SUV stayed close, relentless. Bullets cracked the air. The back window of the sedan exploded into shards. Elena screamed, ducking low, clutching the satchel like a shield. Silas gritted his teeth, slammed the wheel, and cut into a narrow side street barely wide enough for 2 cars. The SUV followed, tires screeching that he spotted an alley to the left, barely wide enough for his sedan. Without hesitation, he yanked the wheel and plunged into it. Metal scraped against brick, sparks flew, but they shot through. The SUV wasn't so lucky. It tried to follow, but the walls caught it, tearing metal like paper. The sound of grinding steel echoed as it wedged itself, trapped. Silas didn't slow until they were 3 blocks away, the city swallowing them again. His hands gripped the wheel, steady but taut. Elena's breaths came ragged, her face pale. That was insane, she whispered. That was survival, Silas said coldly. He parked in an underground garage far from prying eyes. As the engine ticked, Silas leaned back, pulling a flask from his coat. He took a long drink before speaking. I'm taking you to someone, he said. Someone who might still give a damn. Your friend. Elena asked cautiously. Silas' lips twisted. Something like that. He didn't explain further. Some truths were too jagged to share. But in his mind, Marcus Hale's name loomed larger. If anyone could be trusted with the satchel, it was him. And yet, Silas couldn't forget the last words Hale had ever said to him years ago in the blood-stained wreckage of a failed case. You crossed the line, Silas. And one day, it's going to drag you under. That day might be closer than either of them had ever imagined. The precinct hadn't changed. Same stone facade blackened by decades of pollution. Same cracked steps leading up to glass doors smeared with fingerprints and rain. To the outside world, it was the heart of justice. To Silas Kane, it was a mausoleum of broken oaths. Elena shifted uneasily in the passenger seat as Silas parked across the street. You trust this man? She asked, clutching the satchel tighter. Silas didn't answer right away. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and stared at the building as though it were a grave. Trust is a luxury, he said finally. But Marcus Hale is the closest thing this city has left to an honest cop. And you too. You were partners? A shadow crossed Silas' face. Once, but some wounds don't heal. He stepped out before she could ask more, trench coat swaying, boots echoing against the wet pavement. Elena followed close behind, her eyes darting nervously at the officers coming and going. Inside, the precinct was alive with chaos. Phones rang, typewriters clacked, detectives shouted over each other. The air smelled of burnt coffee and sweat. Silas' presence drew stares. Whispers followed him like ghosts. Some remembered him as a legend, others as a disgrace. And could see the far end of the room. Marcus Hale emerged from his office. He looked older, lines cut deeper into his face, hair streaked with gray. But his posture was the same, rigid, disciplined, unyielding. His eyes landed on Silas, and for a moment, the years seemed to collapse between them. Kane, Hale said flatly, his voice like gravel. I thought I'd seen the last of you. You almost did, Silas replied, calm but edged. But here I am. The silence between them was heavy, charged with the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. Then Hale's gaze shifted to Elena, then to the satchel she carried. Not here, Hale said. My office. Now. The blinds were drawn, the door shut. Hale leaned against his desk, arms crossed, studying Silas like a man trying to read an old wound. You've got guts walking in here after what you pulled, Hale said. Silas ignored the jab. This isn't about the past. It's about the syndicate. Hale's jaw tightened. They've been on my radar for years. But every time I get close, the case gets buried. Judges bought, evidence lost. You think you've got something new? Silas motioned for Elena. She placed the satchel on the desk and opened it, spreading out the papers and flash drive. Hale leaned forward, scanning the documents. His eyes widened slightly, but his face stayed controlled. This is damning, Hale admitted. Accounts, transactions, names. Christ, Kane, this is enough to bury half the city. Or to bury us, Silas countered. Hale looked up sharply. Their eyes locked, two men bound by history, suspicion, and something that still resembled respect. Where did you get this? Hale asked. Silas' voice was low. From a dead man. Daniel Vega. The syndicate executed him for keeping records. Elena was his confidant. She's the only reason this evidence didn't burn with him. Hale turned his gaze to Elena. She shrank under his scrutiny, but her voice was steady. Daniel trusted me. He said if anything happened, I had to find Silas Kane. He said you're the only one who could cut through the lies. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Then Hale sighed, rubbing his temples. You know what this means, Kane? If we move on this, we'll be targets. The syndicate will hunt us down before we can breathe. They're already hunting, Silas said, pulling back his coat just enough to reveal the gun at his hip. This isn't a choice. It's survival. A knock at the door broke the tension. A young officer poked his head in. Detective Hale, sir, we've got a problem. Two men downstairs asking questions. Suits. They don't look like feds. Hale's face hardened. Syndicate. Silas was already moving. He pulled the satchel shut and handed it back to Elena. We can't stay here. Hale grabbed his coat and a shotgun from the cabinet. You just brought a war into my house, Kane. Silas gave him a grim smile. It was already here. You just didn't open the door. They slipped out a side exit, down narrow stairwells that smelled of mold and old sweat. The sound of voices echoed through the halls, calm, polite, but with an undercurrent of menace. The syndicate's men were already inside, their reach stretching even here, into the supposed heart of LAW in the alley behind the precinct. Hale led them to an unmarked car. He slid behind the wheel while Silas and Elena piled in. The engine roared to life, and they pulled away just as two figures in suits stepped into the alley. Scanning the shadows, Elena's knuckles were white around the satchel. Hale's hands were tight on the wheel. Silas lit another cigarette, his face half lit by the ember. Where to? Hale asked. Silas exhaled smoke. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't look. And does such a place exist? Elena asked bitterly. Silas' eyes were on the road ahead, the cigarette glowing like a small, defiant flame in the dark. It has to, but deep down he knew the truth. In this city, safety was an illusion. Every step forward dragged them deeper into the vortex. Rain returned by the time they reached the outskirts of the city. Not the soft drizzle of dawn, but heavy sheets that hammered the windshield and blurred the world into a watercolor of neon and darkness. Inside the car, silence pressed down on them like another weight. Elena finally broke it. All of this, Daniel's records, the money, the syndicate's plans, it feels too big. Like no matter what we do, they'll always win. Hale kept his eyes on the road, his jaw locked tight. That's what they want you to think. Fear keeps people obedient. But paper trails don't lie. If these documents are real, if they're as complete as you say, he trailed off, unwilling to finish the thought. Silas flicked ash from his cigarette. His voice was steady, but there was a shadow behind it. Then we don't just have evidence. We have leverage. And leverage is the only language men like Victor understand. The car climbed a winding road into the hills, leaving the city lights like a distant constellation behind them. Hale guided them toward an abandoned church that loomed over the valley. Its steeple was cracked, its windows shattered, but the stone walls still stood strong. This place hasn't been touched in years, Hale said, parking beneath a dead oak tree. It's not safe forever, but it'll buy us time. Inside, the church smelled of dust and rain. Wooden pews lay overturned, and graffiti scarred the walls. Yet in the center, beneath the broken stained glass window, was a table still intact. Hale cleared it with one sweep of his arm. Lay it out, he ordered. Elena obeyed, spreading the documents and plugging the flash drive into Hale's laptop. Numbers filled the screen. Transactions, dates, names. Each line was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry of corruption so vast it was dizzying. Hale muttered curses under his breath as he scrolled. Charities that don't exist. Offshore accounts tied to politicians. A mayor's re-election campaign funded by syndicate money. Jesus, Kane, this isn't just organized crime. This is the city itself. Elena pointed to a column highlighted in red ink. Daniel told me this was the most dangerous part. Bloodlines, he called it. Payments tied to families. Not just bribes, inheritances, legacies. Old families, the kind who've controlled this city for generations. He said Victor wasn't just laundering money. He was rewriting history, buying entire bloodlines into his empire. Hale slammed the laptop shut, his face pale. If this gets out, it won't just be the syndicate coming for us. It'll be every powerful family with their name on these ledgers. Silas leaned back against the cracked stone wall, arms crossed. There were already dead men walking. For a moment, no one spoke. The storm outside howled through broken windows, rattling the rafters. The church felt like a tomb, and the satchel on the table was its cursed relic. Then, from the darkness, came the creak of a floorboard. Silas' hand went instantly to his gun. Hale spun, shotgun raised. Elena froze, eyes wide. Shadows moved between the pews. Figures emerged. 5 men, armed, their suits soaked from the rain. Syndicate soldiers. They had followed. Hands where we can see them, one barked. His accent was thick, his gun steady. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Hadis need it. Funny. I thought the city didn't belong to you either. The man smirked. It will soon. The standoff stretched taut. Rain hammered the roof. Thunder cracked overhead. Silas' eyes flicked between the gunmen, calculating distances, angles, chances. Then he spoke calm as steel. You boys picked the wrong church. Chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the silence. The church became a storm of bullets and splintered wood. Hale fired the shotgun, dropping the first man in a thunderous blast. Silas moved like a shadow, precise and ruthless, his revolver barking in deadly rhythm. Elena dove behind the altar, clutching the satchel to her chest point. 3 gunmen fell. 2 remained, advancing through the smoke, relentless. One raised his weapon toward Elena. Silas didn't think. He moved. The shot rang, and the gunman dropped. The last syndicate soldier snarled, spraying bullets wildly. A round grazed Hale's arm, tearing blood across his sleeve. Silas closed the distance, slammed him against a pillar, and drove his revolver under the man's chin. Tell Victor, Silas growled, voice low and deadly, that I'm not done. He pulled the trigger. The echo rolled through the ruined church like a final hymn. Silence followed, broken only by the rain. Hale staggered, clutching his bleeding arm. Elena crawled out from cover, shaking but alive. The satchel still sat on the table, untouched by bullets, as though fate itself had guarded it. Silas holstered his gun, his face carved from stone. They'll keep coming. Harder, faster, stronger. But now they know we have it, and they know we won't stop. Hale wiped blood from his arm, meeting Silas' gaze. For the first time in years, respect glimmered between them. Then we'd better hit them before they hit us. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. And if we fail, Silas lit another cigarette, the flame casting shadows across his face. He exhaled smoke into the broken church, his eyes hard as steel. Then we go down fighting. Because some oaths may break, but guilt never lets you run. The storm raged on outside, but within the shattered church, a new war had just begun. It wasn't the gunfire that haunted Silas most. It was the silence afterward. The silence inside the abandoned church lingered like smoke, long after the syndicate soldiers lay dead on the stone floor. Hours had passed, yet that silence followed Silas, even as he sat in Hale's dimly lit safe house, a glass of bourbon sweating in his hand. Outside, the storm had finally broken. The city exhaled in relief, but Silas could not. The satchel rested on the table between them, its contents spread in neat stacks. Hale's arm was bandaged. Elena sat curled in a chair, exhaustion etched deep in her face, though her eyes refused to close. They had survived for now, but survival was never victory. You realize what this means, Hale muttered, flipping open a file. His voice was gravel, low and sharp. This isn't just Victor pulling strings. These names, these families, half the city's leaders owe him their loyalty, the other half their silence. He doesn't need to conquer the city. He already owns it. Elena's voice trembled. Then what are we supposed to do? Go to the press? The police? Hale let out a bitter laugh. The press is paid off. The police? Half of them are on this payroll. Silas drank, his silence deliberate. He had been studying one page for nearly an hour, a list of coded transactions. But the names weren't what caught him. It was the dates. His eyes lingered on one entry from years ago, marked with a symbol that twisted something deep in his chest. A memory surfaced, unbidden, the sound of a child's laughter, cut short by gunfire. Blood on his hands. A promise he had once made to a grave no one visited anymore, that he crushed the memory before it could consume him. We don't need the police. We don't need the press. We need to cut into the syndicate's core. Make them bleed where it hurts. Halle fronet. And where exactly is that? Silas tapped the page. Here. Offshore accounts. Shell companies. This is how Victor keeps his empire alive. Without the money, his soldiers are nothing but thugs with empty guns. Elena leaned forward, hope flickering faintly. You mean take away his resources? Silas nodded. Expose them. Burn the accounts. Drain him dry. Hale rubbed his temples. Easier said than done. You need a hacker, someone who can crack encrypted files, follow the trail. These aren't amateurs. They've got entire banks shielding their secrets. Elena bit her lip. I might know someone. Daniel trusted him once, said he was dangerous, but brilliant. Silas met her gaze. Name? Elijah Crow. The name dropped into the room like a stone into dark water. Hale cursed under his breath. You can't be serious. Crow's a ghost. He doesn't work with anyone. Last time someone tried to find him, they ended up in the river with no teeth left. Elena didn't flinch. If anyone can crack Victor's system, it's him. And if Daniel trusted him, then so do I. Silas studied her. There was fire in her eyes, fragile but unyielding. It reminded him too much of someone he used to know. Finally, he stubbed out his cigarette and rose. Then we find Elijah Crow. The journey led them into the underbelly of the city once more, but this time it wasn't the neon streets or mafia-owned clubs. Crow was said to haunt the forgotten places, the ruins of old industry, where the city's heartbeat had gone silent to be why midnight. They stood before a crumbling warehouse near the docks. Rust streaked the walls, and weeds clawed through cracks in the pavement. No guards, no lights, just silence and the smell of salt water. This feels like a trap, Hale muttered, hand resting on a shotgun. It always does, Silas replied. Elena knocked on the metal door 3 times, paused, then twice more. A code Daniel had once whispered to her. For a moment, nothing. Then the door screeched open. Inside was darkness, pierced only by the glow of computer screens. Wires hung like vines, machines hummed like distant thunder, and in the center sat a man with wild hair and sharper eyes. His fingers danced across a keyboard, never slowing as he spoke. You're late, Elijah Crow said, his voice smooth, amused. And you brought guests. Silas stepped forward, unflinching. We need your help. Crow's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everyone needs my help. The question is, what are you willing to lose to get it? Elijah Crow leaned back in his chair, one leg slung over the other, as though he owned the shadows clinging to the warehouse walls. His eyes flicked from Silas to Hale, then lingered on Elena. There was something unsettling in the way he looked at people, like he wasn't studying their faces but dissecting their secrets. I don't like surprises, he said, his fingers pausing just long enough on the keyboard to pull a cigarette from the cluttered desk. He didn't light it, just twirled it between his fingers like a coin. So why don't you three tell me why I shouldn't toss you back into the gutter you crawled out of? Hale biristet. Watch your mouth, Crow. We're not friends. Crow interrupted, his smile sharp as broken glass. No, we're not. But let me guess, you've stumbled onto something bigger than your fist can handle. And now you've come begging to the man everyone pretends doesn't exist. Elena's voice broke the tension. Daniel Vega trusted you. That name struck a nerve. Crow's smile faltered, just slightly, before reforming like steel snapping back into place. Daniel Vega is dead, Crow said flatly. Which means trusting me didn't do him much good, did it? Elena stepped closer, defiance in her eyes. But he trusted me too, and he left me something that could destroy the syndicate. If you help us, we can finish what he started. Crow's gaze flicked to the satchel as though it were a live bomb. His fingers twitched once. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Show me. The files spread across his desk like a surgeon's tools. Screens flickered as Crow fed data into his machines, his expression shifting from boredom to something colder, sharper. Lines of code scrolled endlessly. Hale paced behind him like a restless wolf. Well, Crow didn't look up. Well, you just painted a target on your backs the size of this city. These files aren't just dirty money trails. They're connections. Connections? Silas asked, voice steady. Crow tapped a line of text on the screen. Names. Politicians, judges, union leaders, bankers. Not just local. National. Victor doesn't just run the syndicate. He's part of something bigger. An entire lattice of power hidden behind dummy corporations and shadow accounts. Elena's voice trembled. You mean the syndicate controls more than just this city? Crow finally looked up, his eyes gleaming in the monitor's glow. Control? No. Influence. And influence spreads like a plague. Victor Kane is just one spoke in a wheel that spins far higher than you can imagine. You take him down, another fills the gap. Unless Silas' eyes narrowed. Unless what? Crow smirked. Unless you burn the whole wheel. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Hale broke it first, shaking his head. That's suicide. Even if you could, you'd bring down the entire city with it. Innocent people, innocent. Crow snapped, spinning his chair to face him fully. Tell me, Hale, how many innocents do you think are left when the system itself is guilty? This city feeds on corruption. Take away the rot, and there's nothing left but ashes. Silas remained silent, studying Crow. There was madness in his words, yes, but also truth. Finally, Silas spoke. Can you crack it? Crow leaned back, his grin returning. Oh, I can crack it. But once I do, there's no turning back. You'll have every hired gun, every crooked cop, every politician with a secret to lose coming after you. You'll be the enemy of the city itself. Elena whispered. We already are. Crow's grin widened. Good answer. Hours blurred into each other as Crow worked. Fingers flew across keys, screens filled with encrypted trails unraveling into raw data. Silas stood by the window, cigarette smoke curling into the rafters, watching the docks outside for movement. Hale muttered curses under his breath, never sitting still. Elena sat near Crow, handing him files, translating Daniel's notes, her fatigue hidden by sheer determination. Then something strange happened. One screen froze on a set of symbols, marks that didn't belong to banking software. Crow frowned, leaning closer. This isn't just encryption, he muttered. It's a signature, a message. Silas moved closer. Message from who? Crow's fingers danced, magnifying the code. The symbols twisted into a crude emblem. A serpent devouring its own tail. Elena gasped. Daniel showed me that once. He said it was older than the syndicate. He called it the Circle. Crow's face darkened. The Circle isn't a name you say out loud. If the syndicate is a disease, the Circle is the hand that spreads it. They don't just own cities. They own nations. Hale swore under his breath. We're in over our heads. But Silas' eyes burned with a fire that hadn't been there before. No, we're finally in the right place. Victor's just a piece. But if the circle is real, then maybe Daniel didn't die for nothing. Crow leaned back, exhaling slowly. You're not asking to kill a man, Kane. You're asking to light a fuse under the world. Silas didn't hesitate. Then strike the match. The warehouse had grown unbearably still. The hum of machines, the clicking of keys, even the sea outside seemed to pause, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The emblem of the serpent devouring its tail glowed on the monitor. Mocking them with its quiet power, Crow's hands hovered over the keyboard, motionless for the first time since they had arrived. His pupils reflected the serpent like black mirrors. They know, he whispered. Elena frowned. What do you mean? They know someone is inside their system. Crow muttered, his voice low and sharp. This wasn't encryption, it was bait. A tripwire. And now every alarm they have is ringing. Hale swore and reached for a shotgun. You mean they're coming here? As if in answer, the sound of distant engines rolled across the docks. Heavy tires grinding on wet asphalt. Doors slamming shut. Shadows spilling from black vans. Silas crushed his cigarette beneath his boot. They're already here. The first bullet shattered the warehouse window before the words had finished leaving his mouth. Glass sprayed across the room, sparks flaring as rounds ripped into the servers. Crow dove under his desk, shouting curses. Elena hit the ground, covering her head. Silas moved with practiced precision, his revolver in his hand before the second shot rang out. He fired once into the darkness outside, the muzzle flash lighting his scarred face for a heartbeat. A body fell, silent against the rain. Crow, Silas barked. Kill the lights. Now, the warehouse plunged into darkness, save for the eerie glow of monitors. Hale crouched near the door, shotgun braced against his shoulder. Waiting for the next wave, Elena's heart pounded as she crawled to Silas' side. They found us so fast. They didn't find us, Silas said through clenched teeth. We were betrayed. The words hung heavier than the gunfire. The assault came swift and brutal. Black-clad soldiers stormed the warehouse, their movements precise, too disciplined for mere syndicate thugs. These were professionals, mercenaries hired by something far larger. The circle had sent its hounds. Hale roared as he let the shotgun thunder, each blast tearing men from their feet. Silas moved like a phantom through the shadows, each shot from his revolver deliberate, merciless. Crow scrambled between machines, frantically pulling hard drives, stuffing them into a bag. I'm not dying with my work still here, he shouted. Elena ducked behind an overturned table, clutching a pistol Hale had tossed her earlier. Her hands trembled, but when a mercenary closed in, her fear sharpened into steel. The shot cracked, and the man dropped. Silas glanced back at her, a flicker of something. Approval? Pride? Crossing his face before another bullet hissed past his ear. Minutes stretched like hours. The warehouse filled with smoke and screams, with the acrid stench of gunpowder and blood. Silas' arm burned from a grazing shot, but he didn't slow. Hale was bleeding too, his left arm hanging useless, yet still he fought with savage fury. Then, as suddenly as it began, the attack faltered. The mercenaries withdrew, retreating into the night as if pulled by invisible strings. The roar of engines echoed once more, fading into the storm. The silence returned, heavier than before. Crow staggered upright, clutching the bag of stolen data. They didn't want to kill us, he rasped. If they did, we'd be dead. That was a message. Elena's voice shook. What kind of message? Crow met Silas' eyes, the serpent emblem still glowing faintly behind him. That we've been noticed. The circle doesn't waste time with warnings. They let us live because they want us to run. They want to watch where we go, who we trust. Every step we take from now on, they'll be waiting. Hale spat blood onto the floor. So what? We hole up, go to ground, wait them out. Silas reloaded his revolver slowly, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with grim resolve. No, we don't run. We take the fight to them. The others stared at him, stunned. Victor is just a pawn, Silas continued, his voice steady in the wreckage. But pawns still bleed. We start there. And when the circle comes for us, we'll already be in their house, tearing it apart brick by brick. Elena swallowed, fear and determination warring in her expression. Then what's the next move? Silas exhaled, the smoke of battle still hanging in his lungs. He glanced at Crow, then at Hale, then finally at the shattered window where the rain still fell. We go deeper, he said, into the heart of Victor's empire. And we don't stop until we find where the circle hides. The serpent emblem flickered one last time before the screen went black, plunging the warehouse into darkness. And in that darkness, Silas Kane made his choice, not to survive, but to wage war. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead, scattering light across the ballroom like fragments of 1,000 suns. The music swelled, violins, cellos, a heartbeat dressed in velvet. Champagne glasses clinked, dresses shimmered, laughter rippled through the air, fragrant with perfume and smoke. And at the center of it all, Victor DeLuca raised his glass. The king of the underworld stood draped in midnight silk, a predator wrapped in elegance. His smile was the kind that promised nothing and delivered everything, if one was foolish enough to pay the price. Around him, politicians, magnates, and generals bowed in subtle reverence. No one saw a crime lord. They saw a patron, a benefactor, a man whose fortune flowed like wine into every corner of the city. Yet Victor's eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the room like a hawk circling its prey. He knew the syndicate had been breached. He knew there were hands reaching for threads he had carefully woven in the dark. And somewhere in the storm of his thoughts, one name hissed like poison. Silas Kane. At Victor's lips curved into something between a sneer and a smile. Tonight, the masquerade would be more than spectacle. It would be bait. And in this dance, death would take the lead. Across the bay, in a cramped safe house that smelled faintly of gasoline and rain-soaked wood, Silas tightened the straps of his shoulder holster. His revolver gleamed under the single bulb. Hale, arm freshly bandaged, loaded shells into a shotgun with one hand, every movement precise despite the pain. Crow hunched over a laptop, pale under the flickering light. "The trail's clean," he said, though his voice carried no relief. "Victor's holding a gala tonight. Fundraiser for some children's hospital. Except half the guest list could fund 3 wars. And the other half? Ghosts with no pasts." Elena tied her hair back, her expression hardening into something unrecognizable from the nervous woman she had been days before. She had crossed the line, and there was no returning. Silas looked at each of them, his eyes shadowed but steady. This isn't about blending in. Once we step through those doors, we're already dancing. The music won't stop until one of US falls. Hale Guruntet. I've never been much of a dancer. Silas allowed the ghost of a smile. Then follow my lead. The ballroom smelled of wealth and rot. Silas felt at the moment they slipped inside under borrowed tuxedos and false names. His scars were hidden, but the weight of his revolver pressed against his ribs, a constant reminder of the razor's edge they walked. Crow moved among the crowd, murmuring into a discreet earpiece as he scanned the networks bleeding from the gala security. Elena played her part with eerie grace, her gown shimmering as she drifted close to clusters of men who would kill for a glance. Hale lingered near the champagne bar, an ox in a room full of wolves, his posture daring anyone to question him. And Silas. Silas walked straight toward Victor. Their eyes met across the room like twin blades catching the same light. Victor's smile widened, slow and deliberate, as though he had been waiting for this very moment. "Detective Kane," he said when they finally stood face to face, voice low enough for only Silas to hear. "You honor me." Silas' expression didn't flicker. "Cut the theatrics. You know why I'm here." Victor chuckled, swirling the champagne in his glass. Justice? Revenge? Or is it something darker you don't even admit to yourself? For a heartbeat, the music swelled, drowning the words. But the air between them grew heavier, charged with unspoken violence. Victor leaned closer, his cologne sharp as iron and smoke. You shouldn't have come, Kane. You're not at a gala. You're at your funeral. Silas' jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. Then let's dance. And as if the orchestra had heard the words, the tempo shifted. Violins quickened, drums pounded like war beneath the silk of music. The dance had begun. The waltz spun through the room, pairs of dancers gliding across polished marble. Silas did not move, though the current of bodies swept around him like a river of silk and perfume. Victor, ever the showman, raised his hand and snapped his fingers. A masked woman in crimson appeared at his side, sliding an arm around his waist with the ease of long practice. Enjoy the evening, Victor murmured, his smile gleaming. After all, this is the last music you'll ever hear. And with that, he let the woman pull him into the whirl of dancers. Silas exhaled slowly, every sense sharpened. He knew the message. Victor was not going to kill him outright. No, the crime lord preferred spectacle. He wanted Silas to chase, to stumble, to bleed in rhythm with the violins. This was the game, and every guest in a room was either a piece or an audience. To the far side of the ballroom, Elena's voice whispered into Silas' ear through the hidden comm security detail. From men on the balcony, armed but discreet. Another two at the entrance. And she hesitated. Victor isn't alone. That woman with him, her file's empty. No ID, no history. Like she doesn't exist. Silas' eyes followed the crimson figure weaving through the dancers. She moved with predatory grace, never looking back, yet perfectly aware of his gaze. I'll handle her, he murmured. Stay sharp. Crow's voice cut in, tense. I've breached the network, but something's wrong. Their firewalls aren't slowing me down. It's almost like they want me inside. Silas' stomach tightened. A trap within a trap. Keep digging, he ordered. But don't push too far. If they're baiting you, then we already triggered the snare. Hale shifted at the champagne bar, one hand resting casually on the counter while the other hovered near his concealed shotgun. His eyes tracked two men in tailored suits slipping through a side door. They're moving, he muttered. Looks like they're circling the exits. Silas' reply was flat. Then the only way out is through. The dance floor became a battlefield of masks and music. Silas stepped into it, weaving among couples who twirled obliviously to the looming storm. Every chandelier shimmered with menace. Every smile felt rehearsed. Victor spun his partner effortlessly, his eyes never leaving Silas. The music quickened. Dancers became blurs of silk and black tuxedos. Yet the two men locked gazes as if the entire ballroom had vanished. The crimson woman slipped from Victor's arm and drifted towards Silas like a shadow given flesh. She extended a hand, her mask catching the light in fractured reflections. Dance with me, she said, her voice low and lilting. Silas hesitated only long enough to shift his weight. Refusing was not an option. He took her hand. Her grip was iron. They moved into the steps of the waltz. She pressed close, her perfume sharp and unfamiliar. Beneath her gown, Silas felt the weight of concealed steel. Her eyes, barely visible behind the mask, glittered with something colder than malice. You carry ghosts, she whispered, lips grazing his ear as they turned. Every step you take, they follow. Do you hear them now? Silas didn't answer. His revolver was inches away, but so was her dagger. He felt the hilt against his ribs each time she leaned in. Victor thinks you're hunting him, she continued, her voice honey over venom. But the truth? You're chasing yourself, and you'll die here because you can't escape what's inside you. Silas guided her into a spin, breaking the closeness for a brief second. He met her gaze squarely. Then I'll take death by the hand, if it means dragging Victor into the grave with me. The woman's smile was razor thin. Careful. Death is a better dancer than you. Above them, on the balcony, Hale's warning came sharp. Movement. Snipers. Crow's voice followed, urgent. Silas, they've locked the doors. System override. We're trapped. The music swelled into a crescendo, and Silas knew. The dance had turned into the kill. The first gunshot shattered the music. A crystal chandelier splintered above the crowd, raining shards of glass onto the dancers. Screams tore through the ballroom as chaos erupted. Masks fell away, revealing men with pistols hidden beneath tuxedos, women drawing blades from jeweled clutches. The masquerade had ended. The war had begun. Silas spun the crimson woman away from him just as she drew her dagger. The blade slashed the air where his throat had been. He shoved her into a pair of startled guests and dove behind an overturned banquet table. Bullets stitched the cloth, plates exploding into porcelain dust. Hale! He barked into the calm. The thunder of a shotgun answered. Hale had vaulted from the bar, scattering armed guards with brutal sweeps of his weapon. Each blast lit the room like lightning. The crow's voice was frantic. They've sealed the exits with reinforced steel. I can maybe override, but it'll take time we don't have. Then buy us time, Silas growled, peering over the table. The Crimson Assassin was already back on her feet, stalking him with deliberate calm. Her mask lay shattered on the marble floor, revealing sharp cheekbones, eyes like storm clouds, and the smile of someone who enjoyed the hunt. You should have died years ago, she hissed, dagger glinting in her hand. I'll correct that mistake. She lunged. Silas met her with a chair leg snapped from the wreckage, deflecting the blade with a brutal crack. They circled amid the chaos, her movements fluid, his calculated. Every strike she delivered was lethal, aimed for arteries and heart. Every counter he gave was survival, not dominance. Above them, snipers fired from the balcony. Hale returned fire, his shotgun roaring, forcing two of them into cover. Elena darted between tables, using the confusion to slip close to Victor, who remained unervingly calm at the heart of the storm, sipping wine as if the carnage were part of the entertainment. Victor raised his glass when their eyes met, mouthing the words, "Dance faster." The Crimson Assassin pressed harder, forcing Silas back step by step. Her dagger slashed across his coat, grazing ribs. He retaliated with a brutal elbow, stunning her long enough to draw his revolver. She twisted his wrist, the shot going wide, then slammed her knee into his stomach. They crashed onto the dance floor, rolling among shattered crystal and spilled champagne. She straddled him, blade poised over his chest. "You're nothing but a ghost clinging to guilt," she spat, driving the dagger down. Silas caught her wrist with both hands, muscles straining. The blade inched closer, cold steel pressing against his shirt. His mind flashed with memories. Faces of the innocent, his partner who died, the choices that had carved scars into his soul. And then he used the guilt. With a guttural roar, Silas twisted, reversing their positions. The dagger clattered from her grip as he pinned her arm beneath his knee and pressed his revolver under her jaw. "Ghosts don't die twice," he snarled. The shot was deafening. Her body went limp, her eyes wide with frozen defiance. Silas shoved her aside, rising to his feet with blood slick on his hands. "Silas!" Elena's voice cut through the ringing in his ears. She had reached Victor's dais, but Victor was gone. Instead, a countdown glowed on the massive digital clock behind the stage. 03:00 Crow's panicked shout confirmed what Silas already feared. "It's a bomb." He wired the entire ballroom. "Hale jurset reloading." "Then we better move now." "Doors are still sealed," Crow said, fingers flying over his tablet. "But if I reroute the system, give me 90 seconds. Make it 60, Silas snapped, dragging Elena toward cover. Victor doesn't leave anything half done. The seconds bled away with each heartbeat. Gunfire still crackled, though many of Victor's men had already withdrawn, confident their masterstroke would finish the job. Silas covered Crow as the hacker worked, each shot from his revolver precise, methodical, emptying magazines like punctuation. Elena supported Hale, cutting down anyone who drew near with a scavenged rifle. The countdown hit 00:45. Crow shouted. Almost there. Keep them off me. Two guards rushed Silas. He dropped one with a chest shot, but the second slammed into him, driving him hard against a pillar. The revolver clattered away. They grappled, fists and elbows brutal in close quarters. Silas head butted him, feeling cartilage crunch, then grabbed the man's pistol and fired point-blank .00:20. Done, Crow roared. The locks disengaged with a metallic groan. One set of doors slid open, revealing the night beyond. Go, Silas shouted. Everyone out. They sprinted, weaving through smoke and fire. Hale covered the rear, Elena dragging Crow when his legs faltered. Silas stayed last, eyes darting for Victor, searching, always searching. But the crime lord was nowhere. .00:05. Silas dove through the doors. The ballroom exploded. The night sky ignited in orange and gold, the shockwave hurling them across the marble steps outside. Shattered glass rained down, mingling with the acrid stench of burning silk and blood. The once opulent mansion was now a collapsing inferno, flames clawing at the heavens. Silas staggered upright, ears ringing, ribs screaming in protest. Hale coughed beside him, wiping soot from his beard. Elena pulled Crow to safety, his tablet still clutched desperately in his hands. They had survived. Barely. But Victor had slipped away again. Silas stared at the blaze, guilt gnawing at him. How many innocents had died inside? How many masks had been mere bystanders caught in the storm? Elena touched his arm, her voice quiet. You couldn't have saved them all. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the shadows beyond the fire, where he swore he saw Victor's silhouette watching, calm and unhurried, before vanishing into the smoke. Crow broke the silence, voice trembling. The data I pulled before the lockdown, it's more than just names and accounts. It's a map, a network spanning continents. Victor's reach is bigger than we thought. Hale spat blood onto the ground. So tonight was just the opening act. Silas holstered his revolver, though his hands still shook from the weight of the assassin's blood. No, he said softly, almost to himself. Tonight was the invitation. The inferno behind them roared like applause, a fitting end to Victor's macabre dance. But in the echo of flames, Silas felt the truth settle heavy on his chest. The game wasn't over. Tea had only just begun.